Hi, I'm Michelle Begue with a look at what's happening in Latin America now. But first, our news trivia. In 1972, a plane crashed in the Andes Mountains, leaving behind an incredible tale of survival that has recently inspired a film. From what country were the survivors? We'll have the answer later. Peru's former president Alberto Fujimori was released from prison, where he was serving a 25-year sentence for corruption and human rights violations. The nation's constitutional court reinstated a presidential pardon issued 6 years ago to the 85-year-old. Fujimori's daughter, Keiko, posted on social media pictures of her father at home surrounded by relatives. The Inter-American Court of Human Rights asked the Peruvian state not to execute the release order by the court. Fujimori had been sentenced in 2009, but he was released in December of 2017. He went back to jail in 2019 after the presidential pardon was canceled. Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro says citizens approved a referendum called by the government to claim sovereignty over the Essequibo region. Venezuela says the oil and mineral-rich area of neighboring Guyana was stolen when the border was drawn more than a century ago. Meanwhile, Venezuelan allies like Brazil's President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva asked that common sense prevail in the dispute. No word yet on how Maduro's government will enforce the measure.
Ahora sí, vamos a recuperar los derechos de Venezuela históricos de la Guayana Esequibo. Ahora sí vamos a hacer justicia. Ahora sí vamos a reivindicarnos con la fuerza de todos en unión nacional.
El Salvador's legislature is granting President Nayib Bukele a leave of absence so he can run for re-election on February 4th. The 42-year-old leader is doing so despite the fact the Constitution of El Salvador does not allow for consecutive terms. Most voters are with Bukele, and his popularity is soaring as citizens thank him for his harsh crackdown on gangs. In Chile, victims hope justice will be brought 50 years later. The retired soldier accused of torturing and killing the beloved folk singer Victor Jara during the country's military dictatorship in the 70s has been extradited from the United States. He arrived in Santiago to stand trial at home. Human rights activists say there is still a huge debt to pay to victims of the dictatorship. There are more than 3,000 cases of forced disappearances and executions during the era of Augusto Pinochet. And check out the soldiers patrolling Honduras' streets. This means it's Christmas season, as hundreds of police and military personnel are deployed in the capital to prevent assaults and extortion, which increase during the holiday season. Honduras has one of the highest homicide rates in the world, with 38 deaths per 100,000 inhabitants. That is more than 5 times the world average. Now let's check out the stories we're following for next week. We will be following a mine in Brazil's Alagoas region, the salt mine number 18, belonging to the Brazilian petrochemical producer Braskem, is at imminent risk of collapse. Local authorities have evacuated the local population. State and federal prosecutors have filed a new $203 million lawsuit against the company, requiring them to compensate the families. And now the answer to our news trivia. The answer is C. In 1972, 16 men survived 72 days in harsh conditions after a plane carrying a rugby team from Uruguay crashed in the Andes Mountains in the middle of winter. A new movie called Society of the Snow is depicting the terrifying crash and the horrific ordeal as the young men fought to survive. The film was shot at more than 3,500 meters altitude, exactly in the same place where the plane crashed and at the same time of year. This is the second film about this story after 1992's Alive by celebrated actor Ethan Hawke. And that's it for this week. We'll see you again soon on Latin America Now.